Good Tuesday morning. Today's reading Samuel in the book of Samuel. It's the story of Hannah praying in sorrow before Eli the prophet. And Eli thinks she's drunk, etc., etc. And she just shares her heartbreak with him. And he blesses her that God will give her what she asks. And of course, she then becomes pregnant. Okay. And of course, what will come from that pregnancy is Samuel the prophet, okay? In the St. Mark's Gospel, which is the reading to the day, it's the beginning of his ministry, and he begins it as a teacher, okay? He enters Capernaum with his followers, so he's got his friends with him, his disciples, you see. And on the Sabbath, he entered the synagogue, and what does he do? He teaches, but he teaches in a special way. And the people were astonished by his teaching because he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. That apparently the scribes and the Pharisees would teach, it would say, in the tradition of our fathers. They would give the history of the interpretation. But he would say, but I say to you. So he is his own authority. He is his own authority. He doesn't depend upon anything that precedes him, nor does he need any external validation of his teaching. He says it because he says it. And in the story, he drives out the unclean spirit. Remember, I'll read it to you. He said, in the Senate was a man with an unclean spirit, and he cried out, what do you do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. That's quite a title, okay? That is a colossal title. It's a divine, okay? Jesus rebuked him and said, quiet, come out of him. The unclean spirit convulsed him, and with a loud cry came out of him. All were amazed and asked one another, what is this? A new teaching with authority. That's the kicker line. He even commands the unclean spirits, and they obey him. His fame spread everywhere throughout the whole region of Galilee. His teaching with authority. Who are the unclean spirits? We would think of demonic possession. I wonder if that's actually, maybe so. I don't want to make a claim that I can't back up to what it appears to be. But I don't think of it generically. It's all those forces of evil in the human heart. See? Unclean in the sense those that do, when unclean means at those times meant a violation of the law. See? Those who stand up against the law, who stand outside of the law, who are estranged from the law. And the law, of course, is the law of Moses. And in this profound sense, who stand outside of who and what is Christ, since the Mosaic law ultimately points to Christ. So if you reject the Mosaic law, or you're outside the law, you're also outside of Christ. And that's why they reject possessed man, as it were, with the unclean spirit, resists Christ. And Christ casts him out. He drives away alienation. He makes healthy and whole what is fragmented and is in turmoil. He's a peacemaker in the fullest, deepest sense of the word. The demonic spirit is the spirit not of peace, but of violence, inner violence. War against all that is good and beautiful and true. I think that's how I read that. See, the demonic figure, the demonic element is that which is intrinsically self-destructive. That which wars against what is good, true, and beautiful. Right? Which are the characteristics, as it were, the predicates of divine, that define the divine goodness. God is beautiful. God is wisdom itself, truth itself, being itself. See? That's St. Thomas, you see. And what is the demonic is the counter to that which is ugly and despicable and self-destructive and destructive of others. If I were to think of it in contemporary terms, the demonic figure of our times has got to be Adolf Hitler. I hit this all the time at Mass because of a powerful lesson to learn. What happened? Watch out for the God you serve. The messianic figure you pick, you choose, whether you know it, consider it messianic or not, will be whether you're choosing life or death. I just see what a warning the 20th century is to the rest of us, that having abandoned Christ, remember Hitler was a Christian, a Catholic. So was Mussolini, so was Stalin. Stalin was a Russian Orthodox. They became the great monsters of the West, of the world, accounting for over 80 million people's death, 100 million, just the ones you even know about. They are the monsters of the contemporary world, or maybe the monsters of history. And it's interesting, you see, what happens when you choose the demonic over Christ, when you choose the forces of evil inside yourself and you give in to that and you, as it were, worship power. I was saying in Mass this morning, the movie in 1935, it was a propaganda film for Hitler, but it was called Triumph of the Will, the quintessential opposite of Christ. Christ is not the triumph of the will, but the triumph of self-sacrifice. Hitler was the triumph of the will to power. Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche's will to power. What did it bring him? The rebels of Europe, the rebels of Germany. When the Russians marched into Berlin, where was the will to power? Where was the triumph of the will? It was in a bunker where he blew his brains out. See, history is a frightening picture. The Gospels capture in powerful, simple terms. Christ drives out the demonic. He drives out the evil. If you choose him, but you have to choose him. You have to be available. This poor man was in Christ's presence. He was available to the love of Christ. And hence, he made himself available in such a manner Christ could drive out the demonic, could drive out the evil within him. Whatever that was, whatever it was. We get to choose. We get to choose. And for John's the first letter of John, he speaks at the very end of it, he speaks about the conflict between the Antichrist and Christ. The Antichrist of all the forces of evil in life. Not a singular thing, it's all the forces that divide and destroy. The death figures. The figures of death. When I think of the picture of Adolf Hitler, I see death written all over him. Horror and death. And history will never forgive him. And they will raise in question, why did you worship him in the first place? Something. The tendency we might have as a people to pursue the false messiahs. The messiahs that give us what we want and not what is noble, good, and beautiful, what is eternal. We chose the temporal and perish with it. 20th century is a tremendous laboratory of the Antichrist and Christ. Which do you choose? Which do you choose? The first half of the 20th century, there were notable examples, frighteningly notable examples of Western people, especially Western people, who are the most educated in the world, the most scientifically oriented, choosing the demonic, the Hitlers of this world. He couldn't have risen to the power he had except he was supported. People turned the blind eye to his demonic tendencies. It's something frightening, and if it could happen here, it can happen anywhere. Don't condemn anybody. Life does that for you. But it's just a frightening thought. I think of this a lot because I think you choose whether you're going to choose Christ and the power of goodness and unity and communion, or you're going to choose that which is divisive and destructive. First in your own heart and then in the world in which you live. It's got to be first in your own heart. The Messiah that you believe in, deep within your heart, will make the difference in the Messiah you believe in beyond your heart. And that's the truth. History is a terrifying teacher here. Terrifying. And yet, we are people of hope because Christ is present to us through the church. Christ is present. We can choose the wisdom of Christ in the preaching of the church, or we can choose the messiahs of self-destruction. Take your pick.